At 2:17 a.m., on a moonless night somewhere in the southern waters of the Persian Gulf, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy set into motion what its commanders had spent 14 months rehearsing in secret. Dozens of fast attack craft, disguised under the acoustic signature of routine patrol activity and wrapped in the electronic camouflage of deliberate radio silence, pushed us south through the black chop of the Strait of Hormuz. They were not patrolling. They were planting. 112 naval mines, a combination of contact detonation moored mines, bottom-sitting pressure mines, and next-generation acoustic influence mines purchased through a web of front companies stretching from Belarus to Venezuela, were lowered into the water with systematic precision across the narrowest navigable corridor in the world. At its tightest, the Strait of Hormuz measures 21 miles across. The inbound and outbound shipping lanes are each just 2 miles wide. For the IRGC Navy, this was not a military operation. It was, in their minds, a stranglehold, a single finger pressed against the jugular vein of the global economy. They believed they had been invisible. They believed the darkness was their ally. They believed that the American giant, stung by 2 decades of asymmetric attrition and the political weight of a war-weary public, would hesitate, would calculate, would negotiate. In their command center, buried beneath the hardened rock of Bandar Abbas, senior IRGC naval commanders watched the final mine deployment confirmation scroll across their screens at 3:44 a.m. and allowed themselves the quiet satisfaction of men who believe they have just changed the course of history. The Strait of Hormuz was closed. 20% of the world's daily oil supply, 18 million barrels, was now sitting behind a minefield. The price of Brent crude would detonate at the opening bell in London. American allies in Japan, South Korea, and across the European continent would face an energy catastrophe within 72 hours. And the United States, they calculated, would have no clean military option. Mining is not a missile. There is no dramatic intercept. There is no glowing contrail to point to on CNN. There was only water, and somewhere beneath it death waiting patiently on a pressure plate. The commanders of the IRGC Navy had made a catastrophic miscalculation. They had confused American restraint with American blindness. The first satellite pass over the Strait of Hormuz had already cataloged every single one of their vessels at 2:23 a.m., 6 minutes into the operation. A constellation of Space Force reconnaissance assets, their orbital parameters classified to the point where even their existence in certain configurations is a matter of national security, had been monitoring the IRGC's southern naval sector for 9 consecutive days, following a surge in encrypted communications traffic that U.S. signals intelligence had flagged as operationally significant. The pattern of life analysis was unambiguous. The vessel movements, the acoustic signature suppression, the timing of the operation timed to the gap between commercial satellite passes, all of it had been anticipated. All of it had been prepared for. By the time the last mine sank to the floor of the strait, the targeting package for every participating IRGC naval asset was already compiled, validated, cross-referenced against 3 separate intelligence streams, and loaded into the fire control systems of vessels and aircraft that the Iranians did not even know were within engagement range. At 3:51 a.m., 7 minutes after the IRGC Command Center registered mission complete, a duty officer at U.S. Naval Forces Central Command in Bahrain received a single priority communication. He read it once. He reached for the red handset. The chain of command moved with the quiet mechanical efficiency of a system that has rehearsed this exact moment. Within 4 minutes, the 5-star decision had been made. The operation was named, and the most sophisticated naval warfare apparatus ever assembled by any civilization in the history of human conflict began to move. The operation was designated Iron Tide. It would last, from first kinetic action to total operational conclusion, 51 minutes. The first assets to move were not warships. They were not aircraft. They were the EA-18G Growler electronic warfare jets that had been holding a racecourse orbit at altitude over the northern Arabian Sea since 2 a.m., their powerful jamming suites already warmed and calibrated, their crews sitting in the quiet concentration of people who know that the moment they have been training for is either tonight or not at all. At 3:55 a.m., the Growlers turned south, descended to their operational altitude, and the electromagnetic spectrum over the southern Persian Gulf ceased to belong to Iran. The IRGC's coastal radar network along the strait, the systems that would have given the command center in Bandar Abbas early warning of incoming aircraft, the systems that fed targeting data to the shore-based anti-ship missile batteries on the islands of Abu Musa and the Greater and Lesser Tumbs, went blind. Not degraded, not spoofed, blind. The jamming was total, surgical, and instantaneous. Operators in the Bandar Abbas command center watched their radar screens dissolve into white electronic noise. They reached for communications equipment that had already been severed. They attempted to activate backup systems that were being simultaneously targeted by a coordinated cyber warfare package that had been pre-positioned inside Iranian military network infrastructure 3 months earlier. The nervous system of the IRGC Navy's defensive architecture had been severed completely in under 90 seconds, and they had not heard, seen, or felt it coming. The HARM missiles came next. 4 AGM-88E advanced anti-radiation missiles, launched from 2 F/A-18F Super Hornets, operating off the USS Abraham Lincoln, operating approximately 200 miles to the southeast, rode the radar emissions of the few Iranian air defense systems that had attempted to activate through the jamming envelope. The missiles are not guided by the operator after launch. They home autonomously on the electromagnetic signature of the radar itself. The moment an Iranian radar operator attempted to push through the interference and acquire a track, the radar became the target. The first battery on Abu Musa Island was rendered inoperable at 4:02 a.m. The second, on the northern tip of Greater Tunb, at 4:03 a.m. The third, a mobile system the Iranians had believed was concealed, at 4:04 a.m. Its concealment had been identified by infrared satellite imagery 48 hours prior. The targeting coordinates had been in the strike package since Tuesday. With the electromagnetic and kinetic suppression of Iranian air defense complete, the mine-hunting operation commenced under direct air cover at 4:06 a.m. This is the part that the IRGC commanders had considered the American dilemma. You cannot bomb a mine. You cannot launch a cruise missile at a pressure plate sitting 60 feet underwater. Mine clearance, in the traditional sense, is slow, dangerous, methodical work measured in days and weeks. The IRGC Navy had assumed that the minefield would hold for at minimum 72 hours, long enough for the economic shockwave to register in global markets, long enough for diplomatic pressure to build, long enough to demonstrate to the world that Iran could reach out and choke the modern economy with one hand. What the IRGC commanders did not factor into their calculus was the MH-60S Seahawk helicopter fleet operating from 3 Arleigh Burke-class destroyers that had repositioned during the night into the northern approaches of the strait. They did not know about the AN/AQS-20C mine-hunting sonar systems those helicopters were carrying, capable of detecting, classifying, and transmitting the precise 3-dimensional coordinates of naval mines from a safe standoff distance. And they absolutely did not know about the developmental autonomous underwater vehicle systems, classified programs that will not appear in any public defense procurement document for another 6 years, that had already been deployed ahead of the helicopter sweep, mapping the minefield's geometry with acoustic precision while the IRGC's fast attack craft were still finishing their planting runs. The minefield had taken the IRGC Navy 14 months to plan and 1 night to deploy. The geometry of it, the specific arrangement of mine types, the spacing, the layering of contact and influence mines designed to complicate route clearance, was clever. It reflected genuine expertise and genuine investment. It was rendered operationally irrelevant in 31 minutes. Neutralization of the mine threat was accomplished through a combination of helicopter-deployed Mark 104 acoustic minesweeping gear, precision-guided demolition charges delivered by the autonomous underwater systems, and where the mine density required more immediate resolution, the use of airborne laser systems, designating targets for precision-guided munitions from aircraft orbiting above the diplomatic engagement altitude that would trigger international incident protocols. The strait was confirmed navigable, primary commercial channels clear, at 4:37 a.m., 20 minutes and 46 seconds after the first mine was neutralized. But Iron Tide was not a mine-clearing operation. Mine clearance was the opening movement. The score had many more bars to play. While the strait was being cleared, the targeting cycle for the IRGC Navy's surface and infrastructure assets was completing its final validation pass. The assets assigned to this phase of the operation were not the destroyers conducting mine-clearing escort. They were not the Super Hornets that had fired the HARM missiles. The assets assigned to the destruction phase of Iron Tide were a strike package that had launched from the USS Abraham Lincoln and a second carrier, the USS Harry S. Truman, at 3:58 a.m., the moment the Growlers had completed the initial jamming suppression and had been flying a holding pattern over the northern Arabian Sea, waiting for the mine clearance operation to reach its operational threshold. 44 aircraft. A combination of F/A-18E and F/A-18F Super Hornets, loaded with JDAM precision-guided munitions, AGM-154, joint standoff weapons, and AGM-158 BJASSMER cruise missiles. Alongside them, 8 B-1B Lancer bombers, those massive variable sweep-wing instruments of industrial-scale kinetic delivery, each one capable of carrying more than 80,000 pounds of precision-guided ordnance, had departed from their forward operating location in Diego Garcia at 11:30 p.m. the previous evening, had refueled over the northern Indian Ocean from a KC-135 tanker chain, and were now orbiting at altitude with a combined strike capacity that exceeded the entire air force of most sovereign nations. The target list for the destruction phase of Iron Tide contained 67 individual aim points. Every IRGC fast attack craft and patrol vessel involved in the mining operation, tracked continuously since their first movement at 2:17 a.m., was on that list. The pens and maintenance facilities at Bandar Abbas that supported the IRGC Navy's fast attack fleet. The hardened command center beneath the rock where the commanders who ordered the mining operation were, at that moment, attempting to restore communications with their severed coastal defense network. The shore-based anti-ship missile storage and launch complexes on Abu Musa and the Toonbi Islands, the batteries that were supposed to deter exactly this kind of American response, the naval logistics hub at Jask, the IRGC Navy's secondary command node at Keshem, the fuel and ammunition storage complex at Bandar A Lenge, the radar integration center that networked the Strait's defensive systems together and was now a building full of dark screens and panicking technicians. 67 aim points. The B-1Bs alone carried enough ordnance to engage every single one of them. The strike package entered Iranian airspace, what remained of it in any functional sense, at 4:09 a.m. The Growlers maintained their jamming envelope. No Iranian fighter aircraft had lifted from any base within the operational radius. The air defense suppression had been total enough that the few pilots who had been brought to cockpit readiness during the communications blackout had received contradictory orders. Then no orders. Then the distant, abstract understanding that something was fundamentally wrong that no training had prepared them for. The decision not to scramble was not cowardice. It was the rational response of professional military men who could see that their command architecture had ceased to function, and who had, in that moment, no situational picture to fly into. They sat on the ground. They waited. It was the correct decision.
it kept them alive. The first JASSM-R impacted the IRGC Naval Command Center at Bandar Abbas at 4:14 a.m. The cruise missile had been in flight for 11 minutes, following a terrain masking profile that kept it below Iranian radar detection altitude for the entirety of its terminal approach. It struck the hardened facility's primary access shaft with a GBU-28 penetrator warhead, a weapon designed to drive through multiple meters of reinforced concrete before its delayed action fuse detonates the main charge in the cavity below. The seismic signature registered as a 2.1 magnitude event on monitoring stations in Oman. The command center was rendered inoperable. The IRGC Navy's central command apparatus for the Strait of Hormuz operational theater ceased to function at 4:14 a.m. and 15 seconds. The commanders inside had been issuing orders to communication systems that no longer existed. The last thing they succeeded in transmitting before the facility went dark was a request for a status update from the Abu Musa radar battery. The battery had been rendered inoperable 11 minutes earlier. The fast attack craft were next. Tracked continuously since their mining runs, they had attempted to scatter into the shallow coastal waters north of the strait, where they believed the combined acoustic signature of the coastline would confuse American targeting systems. This was a doctrine developed in the late 1990s based on an accurate assessment of the technical limitations of American naval targeting at that time. In the intervening 27 years, those limitations had been resolved. Every vessel was acquired. Every vessel was engaged. The weapons of choice were a combination of AGM-154, CJSOW glide munitions delivered from altitude by Super Hornets, and, for the vessels that had pushed into the very shallow water closest to shore, Mk-54 lightweight torpedoes delivered by the MH-60R Seahawk anti-submarine helicopters that had been repositioned to the destroyer screen specifically to address this contingency. 31 fast attack craft and patrol vessels were rendered inoperable or sent to the bottom in a window that lasted 9 minutes and 40 seconds, from 4:17 a.m. to 4:26 a.m. The entire surface combat capability of the IRGC Navy's Strait of Hormuz operational force was eliminated from the battlespace in the time it takes to brew a pot of coffee. There was one moment, one single complication that the operational planners had anticipated and that materialized precisely as predicted. At 4:19 a.m., as the strike package was engaged across the vessel target set, a single IRGC fast attack craft, a tier-class vessel operating on manual navigation and manual weapons targeting, having reverted to pre-digital backup procedures when its electronic systems went dark, launched two C-704 anti-ship missiles from the coastal shadow of Keshem Island, targeting the radar emission of one of the American destroyers in the mine clearance screen. The missiles were in the air for 4 seconds before the destroyer's AN/SPY-6 radar, which had detected the launch from the acoustic signature of the missile motors before it had even acquired a radar track, handed targeting data to the ship's evolved Sea Sparrow missile system. Both C-704 missiles were intercepted at a distance of 6 miles. The crew of the destroyer felt the detonation of the warheads as a sharp pressure pulse through the hull. Not damage, not even close to damage, but visceral enough that it was something, a reminder that the operation was not frictionless, that even in overwhelming dominance, there are moments where the mathematics gets personal. The tier-class vessel that fired those missiles was engaged by a JSOW from an F/A-18E that had been tracking it for 22 seconds. It was rendered a total loss of asset at 4:22 a.m. The B-1B package completed its work between 4:21 a.m. and 4:39 a.m. 18 minutes of precision-guided industrial-scale destruction. The naval infrastructure at Bandar Abbas, the pens, the maintenance facilities, the fuel storage, the hardened weapons magazines, was systematically rendered inoperable by a combination of GBU-31 Joint Direct Attack munitions and GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrators. The GBU-57, weighing 30,000 pounds, is not a weapon that announces itself gently. When it impacts hardened infrastructure, the ground moves. Not metaphorically. The concussive transfer of energy through the earth registers on seismic networks. Buildings within a quarter mile that are not the target experience structural compromise from the pressure wave alone. The IRGC Navy's primary naval base at Bandar Abbas, the hub through which all of their Strait of Hormuz operational capability flowed, ceased to exist as a functional military installation at 4:31 a.m. The Naval Logistics Facility at Jask followed at 4:34 a.m. The secondary command node at Keshem at 4:36 a.m. The fuel and ammunition complex at Bandar Elengi at 4:38 a.m. The Radar Integration Center, already sightless, already severed, already a building full of men trying to understand what was happening to them, at 4:39 a.m. The island installations were addressed simultaneously by a dedicated sub-package of 4 Super Hornets per island, each carrying a mixed load of JDAM precision-guided bombs and AGM-154 glide munitions. Abu Musa, Greater Tunb, Lesser Tunb, 3 islands that the IRGC had fortified over 2 decades into layered anti-ship and anti-air defensive nodes designed to make the Strait of Hormuz a killing ground for any naval force attempting to force a passage. 3 islands that the IRGC had considered functionally impregnable given the political cost of attacking sovereign Iranian territory. The political calculus had changed when Iranian mines were placed in an international waterway. The fortifications on all 3 islands were rendered inoperable between 4:22 a.m. and 4:29 a.m. The remaining physical structures were left standing. The operation's mandate was military infrastructure, precisely defined, not the island geography itself. What was removed was every weapon system, every communications node, every radar installation, every hardened missile storage cell. The islands remained. They were simply no longer militarily relevant. At 4:48 a.m., U.S. Central Command issued the formal all-clear for commercial shipping to resume transit through the Strait of Hormuz. The strait had been closed, in operational terms, for 2 hours and 31 minutes. Crude oil markets, which had spiked 22% at the Asian Open on reports of the mining operation, reversed sharply on confirmation of the clearance. The operational cost of the temporary closure would be absorbed by strategic petroleum reserve releases coordinated in the same early morning hours. The economic disruption, while significant, was measured in hours rather than the days or weeks the IRGC commanders had projected as their minimum viable window for strategic effect. The final phase of Iron Tide was not kinetic. It was communication. At 5:02 a.m., U.S. Central Command published a comprehensive battle damage assessment, satellite imagery, targeting video, electronic intercept summaries through an allied intelligence sharing network that ensured the full scope of what had occurred in the preceding 3 hours was understood in detail by every naval power and regional actor within 12 hours. This was not information operations for public consumption. This was a precise, technical message delivered through channels that military professionals read and understand. The message was not ideological. It contained no rhetoric. It was a set of facts, laid out with clinical precision about what the most advanced military force in human history can do to a regional naval power. That mistakes restraint for incapacity, that mistakes patience for weakness, that mistakes the absence of a response to a previous provocation for the permanent unavailability of a response. The facts were sufficient. Facts delivered at this scale of operational demonstration require no editorial commentary. The Strait of Hormuz on that morning was open. The mine threat had been cleared in 31 minutes. The surface threat had been eliminated in 9 minutes and 40 seconds. The shore-based defensive infrastructure that was supposed to make the strait a fortress had been rendered inoperable across 14 separate installations in 18 minutes of B-1B operations. The IRGC Navy's command architecture for the operational theater had been severed in the first seconds and physically destroyed before the sun rose. 51 minutes from first kinetic action to operational conclusion. No American vessel was lost. No American aircraft was lost. The mine threat, the missile threat, the command threat, and the infrastructure threat had been addressed with a precision and a speed that the IRGC Navy's most sophisticated planning had not come close to accounting for. 20% of the world's daily oil supply moved through the Strait of Hormuz that morning, as it had every morning before it and would every morning after. The tankers rode the deep-water channel through the strait that the mine clearance operation had confirmed. Their hulls passed over the place where, 12 hours before, a minefield had sat on the floor of the ocean. The water was very dark. The sky was beginning to lighten in the east. The ships moved through the passage at steady speed, on schedule, carrying the energy that kept the modern world functioning. And somewhere in the deep current silence beneath their keels, resting on the silt of the seabed, were the ruins of a plan that had cost 14 months to build and 51 minutes to answer. Restraint is not weakness. It is the patience of a system that knows with absolute certainty that when it moves, nothing will move back.